Okay, good evening everybody. If I can bring this meeting to order, thank you. Okay, a very warm welcome to those attending the Major Applications Planning Committee this evening and to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. My name is Councillor Steve Tuckwell and I am the Chairman of this committee. Details of the business to be considered this evening are shown on the agenda, copies of which are accessible online underneath the live broadcast. For those present in the room this evening and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. A reminder to anyone speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if the microphone is switched on. Okay, some domestic announcements in terms of a fire alarm. We're not expecting an evacuation drill this evening, so if the alarm does go off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. For mobile tablets and devices, could I ask that those are switched off or to silent, but I do recognise that some officers and indeed councillors will be using devices to view the agenda paperwork this evening. Okay, we can now go on to introduce some of the attendees, the people around this table this evening. So we'll introduce the councillors first and foremost. This evening we have Councillor Ahmed Walana, we have Councillor Bennett, we have Councillor Davis, we have Councillor Dotts, we have Councillor Gaelic and Councillor Gill. So good evening to you all. We are supported by a team of officers this evening, so I'll just quickly introduce those. So we have Mandip Malhotra, our Major and Strategic Planning Applications Manager. We have Ian Thine, who is our Specialist Planning Manager. We have Alan Tilley, who's our Transport and Highways Development Manager. We have Chris Brady, Principal Planning Officer. We have Andrew Thornley, who's also a Principal Planning Officer. Our legal advisor this evening is Glenn Egan, and Steve Clark is our Democratic Services Officer. I haven't missed anybody, have I? That's good. Okay, right, that's the introductions and Chairman's announcements dealt with, so we can now move on to the agenda proper this evening, and we'll start with agenda item 1. Apologies for absence, Steve.
So, apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Higgins, with Councillor Ahmed Walana substituting this evening, Chairman.
Okay, and a very warm welcome to Councillor Ahmed Walana for stepping in this evening. Thank you. Agenda item 2 this evening is to get any declarations of interest in matters before this meeting. Any declarations of interest? No, we can record that as none, Steve. Thank you. Agenda item 3 is to agree the minutes of our previous meeting, which was on the 22nd of February. They are contained on pages 1 to 5 of the bundle. Can I take those as agreed? Thank you. Okay. Agenda item 4 is matters notified in advance or urgent, which there aren't any. And agenda item 5 is to confirm that today's meeting is all in part 1, which is public, with no part 2 or private items. The agenda this evening will be taken in the order published, and we have one petition item this evening, which is agenda item 8. Okay, right, that brings us to the point where we can actually get into the main body of this evening's proceedings, and that's agenda item 6, which is an HS2 application for the Marylebone to Aylesbury line, Breakspear Road South. So I'll hand the baton over to Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. So item number 6, HS2 to Marylebone, Aylesbury line, Breakspear Road, South Harefield. Bit of a disingenuous title. It's actually the request for approval of bringing into use under condition imposed by Schedule 17 of the High Speed Rail Act for Schedule 1 work number 163, 169-71 and 173 for a temporary conveyor nearly 2 kilometres in length, covering an area of approximately 20 hectares, commencing at the West Ruislip Portal and terminating at the southern treatment in between Harbour Road and Breakspear Road South. Not the most catchiest of titles there, Chair, but I think it's moving on. This is the conveyor belt moving all the way from the West Ruislip Portal. Hopefully you can see the newfangled mouse thing. There we go. West Ruislip Portal all the way out, across the River Pin, and then over Breakspear Road South, and then along the Chiltern line, and this is where the southern, the soil treatment area is, the STA, where the material is coming out. I was going to put a load of maps in, but I thought actually the way that the bringing use applications work for HS2 is that it gets built, but it can't be used until we have approved the mitigation associated with it. So we're not here to determine the merits of the scheme of a conveyor. It's merely just to determine whether or not there is sufficient mitigation in place to warrant it being brought into use. So as you can see at the bottom of the picture in front of you, these are the two tunnels, tunnel boring machines. So you've got the So Sheila is the tunnel boring machine on the left-hand side and Caroline on the right-hand side. And you'll see at the back of these two tunnel portals, long stretch of ventilation pipe, that's to keep air going into the tunnel boring machines. And also at the back of these are conveyor systems. And the conveyor systems are there to take the muck that is constantly being churned out. So it's a 24/7 operation, or as long as the TBMs are, tunnel boring machines, TBMs are in process. And the conveyors start just at the top of the screen, at the end of the tunnel boring machines. You can see them there. At the minute, there is a temporary conveyor in place. This didn't require a bring into use application because it was not a scheduled work, but they're slightly out of sync with their program. The conveyors we're talking about tonight should have been in place when the tunnel boring machine set off, but for various program matters they weren't. So they put a temporary conveyor in place, and the ones tonight are still temporary, but longer in situ. And you can see the line of the conveyor is sort of drawn out here. So these are this is drone footage from about a month ago or so, so it's moved on slightly. But this is where the conveyor goes across the River Pin, and you'll see next to it the River Pin overbridge that has been approved by this committee before, and the new HS2 line over Breakspear Road South, in Breakspear Road South just along there. And the conveyor will sit between the trace, the line of the HS2 route, and the Chiltern line. Moving further down the track, you see Breakspear Road South at the bottom of the picture, and then just alongside the Chiltern line you'll see the length of conveyor, and at the top you'll see the crossing of the Chiltern line where it goes to the southern, the soil treatment area. Just pointing out here, this is Brackenbury House, so we have one receptor. So after going back one, so at the bottom of the screen is the greenways, and that is our last sensitive receptor. So once you get past here, there's a property on the right hand side that's now vacant. No other properties here, so no other sensitive receptors in terms of noise, which is the principal issue with the conveyor, until you get to Brackenbury House. So that is the primary sensitive receptor here. They've not been overly engaged with the project so far, but that is nonetheless a sensitive residential receptor that we have to consider in terms of noise. And that is the only one. There's no residential receptors at the MSD facility. So moving further down, as we cross the Chiltern line into the southern sustainable placement area, and this is a soil treatment area of that. You'll see this large structure here, which is where all the muck will eventually come off the conveyor, get treated before going on to the southern sustainable placement area, which we've recently approved. And then just to the right of the screen, just to the north of the Chiltern line, that's the Copthall Tunnel area. You can see the portal just at the top of the screen, and that was approved, I think, a couple of years back by this committee. So you can see a lot of work going on, and some of the fruits of the labour of this committee in approving that. You can see it's actually all starting to take shape. So in terms of the conveyor system itself, it has been approved as part of the Act through Parliament. So, as I said before, it's not the merits of whether we should have one. It is necessary to get the material from the TBMs to the soil treatment area. Without a conveyor system, everything will have to go out on the road network, which we're obviously very keen to avoid. So it is serving a very useful purpose, but nonetheless there are issues with it. And the issues predominantly relate to visual impact. Not really much we can do about the visual impact of a conveyor system, especially since it's already been approved by Parliament. But these are mitigation measures that have been put in place to reduce some of the harm of it. So its alignment is close to the Chiltern line to avoid construction areas. So you'll see it's basically alongside of a haul road as well. So it's within the context of what is already a construction area of HS2. It's a neutral grey colour to avoid glare and distraction to trains on the Chiltern line. Coverings will enclose the surface conveyors, so this keeps the soil from coming out, and also it reduces noise impacts as well, which is very key, especially alongside the greenways. The alignment at ground level and adjacent to existing acoustic hoarding to minimise visual impacts. So where it's at the tunnel portal itself, most of it is behind existing hoardings. The issue there is where it actually goes over the rail sidings, which we approved last time. So there is an element where it goes slightly into the slightly raised above that hoarding, but that is all encased at that point and enclosed in a robust acoustic protective area. The foundations sit outside the flood risk zones, so there is no flood risk impact associated with this, and also to note it is only a temporary solution for HS2, so 2 to 3 years at the most. And lighting levels will be minimalised and directional when necessary. So based on that, Chair, the biggest issue for us is the noise implications for it. We had some problems with the temporary conveyor that they put in initially, but that wasn't robustly designed. We've had some, we have been at loggerheads with HS2 with that in the past, but that's been improved to a point where we have minimal complaints associated with that now. This one is a more robust structure, encased properly. We've learned some lessons from that original temporary conveyor belt, so they'll be put into fruition with this conveyor system. So the recommendation, Chair, moving to a swift conclusion, is the approval of the Schedule 17, and just to note that the noise implications from the conveyor will be dealt with through the Section 61 of the Control of Pollution Act, and that allows us to set conditions in relation to noise monitoring and mitigation as well. So that element is outside of the purview of this committee tonight, but we have approved the Section 61 and there are copious amounts of conditions attached to that. So there you go, Chair, approval. That's the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As ever, Ian, sort of taking what is a very technical set of circumstances and explaining it to committee is always welcomed. Just want to draw members' attention. There is a slight correction on the addendum on this one, so there is a slight correction in the bundle that you've got there. So just to draw your attention to that. Okay. Right. So there's no speaking rights on HS2 applications, as we know. This committee has dealt with quite a few of these now. So I'll just open it up for any questions or for Ian. So Councillor Davis.
I'm just a little bit concerned about the impact on the wildlife along that bank. I read the section. I know it's in the report. It says I've lost it. But what protection are we putting in for the birds and the bats along that section? Thank you, Chairman.
Yes, certainly. So the ecological impact in this area, regardless of the conveyor, is quite high anyway, because this is exactly where the rail line is being built, and as we showed, is right next to the rail line and the Chiltern line. So there is limited ecological impact in that regard. It would be the scheme is impactful anyway. There are processes in place within HS2 through the Code of Construction Practice for managing any veg clearance, and most of that has already been done. So in terms of ecology, the harm is minimal, and again, going back to what we're allowed to consider here is whether or not there should be further mitigation. So the mitigation for all the harm of HS2 is being dealt with through the site restorations and land restorations, so that will come at a later date. So any impact from the loss of vegetation that has already happened to accommodate the works that are ongoing, as well as this conveyor, will form part of the restoration plans.
Okay, thank you. Okay, no follow-up there. Okay. Yeah, if I may, I'll indulge myself with a question, if that's okay. All I wanted, you mentioned about noise, and I just wanted to just test or get an understanding. It's probably in the report some about how noise is monitored and what HS2's responsibilities are if it goes above a certain level.
Certainly. So noise is actively monitored across the route. We have, in this area, off the top of my head, we have 10 monitoring points from across the greenways, and they're on people's properties, and they record noise consistently. That noise is monitored, automatically recorded and fed back to a database that the council has access to. We meet with HS2 every fortnight to talk about the monitoring results. We always disagreed with the levels of which the noise they can go up to, certainly at night time, so they were agreed by Parliament. But where we have noise complaints, that's our real biggest issue. It's not so much the noise data, because people don't respond in the same way. People are the best noise monitors. So we respond to complaints, and then it's a question of how the project responds to those in turn. That's through the use of best practicable means, which is an industry standard, which basically says, are you doing the utmost to reduce the noise? So with the the conveyor that did have noise problems, the temporary one that they put in place, there was a lot of noise complaints initially, and then we resolved those with HS2 through these noise meetings, through the recording of the noise, and that included putting in extra noise mitigation around the drives where there was issues with the noise itself, where the rollers were new and not properly greased as well. So all that was rectified through that process. So there is a fairly robust route to resolving any noise issues should they arise.
No, thank you for that, Ian. And I know we've had a couple of questions, but I do really want to bring Glenn in just to sort of like give his legal overview of these HS2 matters. I know we've heard from Glenn every time we have an HS2 application, but I think it's also really worthwhile just hearing, Glenn's experience in this and what we can and can't do, what's in our remit and what's not in our remit. So over to you, Glenn. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, as Ian said there, the central issue is there any additional mitigation that can be provided? And I don't think I can do any better than refer you to the conclusion on page 23 of the report that sets that out clearly. Officers can't think of anything else that can reasonably be done. So on that basis, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Wise words as ever. Thank you, Glenn. I've got Councillor Davies indicated and Councillor Bennett. Thank you.
A bit of a curveball. Do we have to protect the house where the residents are still living? Do we have to put any protection in for vibration causing any damage or anything like that?
So in terms of the conveyor, there is no expected vibration impacts. There is vibration impacts from the HS2 construction works itself, and particularly when the TBMs were launched, and quite a lot of activity at the West Ruislip portal. Along with the noise monitoring equipment, we have vibration monitoring equipment as well. Areas that were identified as sensitive before were had a survey undertaken by HS2 Limited, so there's a pre and post survey if vibration does become a bit of an issue. But that's not expected with the conveyor. That's sort of a general response in relation to the construction activity that's happened to date.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. I think, as usual, our hands are tied with HS2. I think the conclusion that Glenn referred to, I think officers have done a really good job of trying to find as much mitigation as possible. On that basis, I'd like to propose that we move their recommendation.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Yeah, on the basis of that, I'm happy to second with any further conditions, if may.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Dott.
Thank you, Chair. Like Councillor Bennett said, nothing much can be done because it's already because of legislation. I just want to bring a notice to the committee. This evening, I received an email from a resident, and I believe all the committee members, they received the similar emails. And do we need to include something in there, or?
I'm sure Glenn will I'll say what I've got to say, and then I'm sure Glenn will tell me if I'm offside or not. But I think any email that we receive is not in the public domain, and if we have received an email, yeah, it's nice, but it's not part of the agenda pack that we've got in front of us, and it's not in the public domain. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that, Glenn. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, right, we are moved and seconded on this application. Can I take a show of hands, please, for officer's recommendation? Okay, that's unanimous 7, so I can agree this evening. Agenda item 6 is approved. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, we can move swiftly on to agenda item 7 now, which is our second HS2 item of the evening, and I'm going to hand back to Ian.
Thank you again, Chair. So item number 7, Pond this time, Chair, so a slightly crisper title. We've actually seen this one before, Chair, so just to go through where this is. So this is part of the Harble Road realignment. So as HS2 comes through, Harble Road needs to be aligned to ensure that the railway can get above and back down again, so that it goes across on the viaduct across the Colne Valley. So the whole of Harble Road gets realigned from Skip Lane all the way up to where it sort of meets the existing route towards the north at Harefield. So just for some context, there's the rough alignment of the new Harble Road. You can see Bridge over Chiltern Line This will be the bridge over the new, this will be the Breakspear Road bridge over the top of the new high-speed line, and then a bridge over the New Year's Green Bourne as well. So the area we're talking about tonight is just in here. So we have approved this scheme already, but what we did do was the area in green was left and reserved for a later stage. And the reason for that, and I'll just touch on some of the problems we had with this this pond. So by the time it came to us, we still weren't happy as officers with the design of this pond. And you'll see on here, you'll have a large access route through. Originally it was going all the way around the pond, but that got reduced, but still not sufficient. So that's a hard engineered structure around the pond itself. The pond was also a hard engineered structure with a very robust outfall towards the New Year's Green Bourne to the south. The other thing you'll notice is a fence line all the way around it. Officers felt that this was a bit overkill, a bit excessive for what is essentially just a drainage pond that's draining Harville Road, the new realigned Harville Road. The way that we would normally and hopefully and have aspirations to achieve such a design is to have something that is more wildlife friendly. It serves an ecological function as well as obviously the engineering function. This only served the engineering function, so we put a green line around it, and this was deferred for later approval. So this application relates to the attenuation pond only, and the building works associated with the concrete weir and the non-woven geotextile bags at the attenuation pond. The earthworks associated with the attenuation pond creation, and the swales, gabion baskets, access road and pedestrian track, and the location of the fencing. So where we've got to now, you'll see a much softer design. So there is an access track still, that's required for maintenance, so we've still got that in scope. But then after that, there is a smaller track around the side, so that's a landscape track, sort of an aggregate finish, and then a pedestrian route around the side for visual inspections. The actual pond itself has been recontoured for more wildlife-friendly reasons and for better planting, and the outfall is a more natural weir feature that allows for an interaction of wildlife from the pond into the New Year's Green Bourne, and then further afield into the area southwards, which this committee has also approved. So you might remember the wetlands that we talked about underneath the viaduct. So it's a more in keeping with what we're trying to restore this area to. Notwithstanding the fact it's going to have a chuffing great big viaduct through the middle of it, but we're doing the best we can with what we've got to play with. So just to remind everyone why we need the pond, Harville Road is on top here, and it's on steep embankment as it's been built up to ensure that it goes over the top of the HS2 line. So with that embankment, steeper slopes, you need somewhere to capture the water so that we don't increase the risk of flooding in the area. So in that event, the water that's coming from Harville Road has got to go somewhere. It's going into the pond. The pond then drains into the New Year's Green Bourne. I'm just completing the picture there. So you'll see a much softer landscape feel. You'll see the fence line is reduced heavily. So before, as you see from the image at the top, it went all the way around the pond. We want the pond to be a wildlife feature, and if mammals want to come into the pond, we can't have a fence up around because that puts them off. We've also got a livestock to the south as part of the area's south restoration. The livestock is there to help manage the landscape. So again, we don't want to be putting barriers and fences up for their movement around this area, which will all be managed around the pond by HS2 Limited. The pond itself will be a highways asset managed by the council or green spaces team under a commuted sum. Councillor, before you worry about budgets. The landscaping scheme around the side of it, that's still to be agreed. So you would see an objection in the committee report from the Colne Regional Park. Thank you, Mandip. And they objected to the planting scheme that's in there. The planting scheme is not before the committee tonight. That's part of land restoration and bringing into use, so that will come at a later date. But nonetheless, we have put an informative on just to making sure that we have tackled that issue. So again, Chair, We feel like we've made a lot of progress with this pond. It's good to take it away from last time and bring it back when it was in a suitable position. We believe we've done that. So approval of Schedule 17, no conditions, and subject to the informative regarding restoration, landscaping, and obviously the planting plan that will satisfy the Colne Valley Regional Park. Thank you, Madam.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much again for that, Ian. I do remember this scheme, actually. The decision that was it would come back to this committee when it was in a better state. So before we go to members, Glenn, is there anything you want to add on this in addition? No? So what you said last time still holds. So we can go straight to members for any questions. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. As always, I think our hands are tied with this. The pond is there for a reason. We've been given the facts. I'd be happy to move on this with officers' recommendations.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Dott?
I'm happy to second, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. No, any other further questions? Councillor Bennett?
No, just to say, Chairman, I think this is a great example of where officers and this committee push back and secure better outcomes for residents in Hillingdon. I think it's great. It looks much better. Thank you.
No, I think everybody in the room completely agrees with that, so thank you. Right, we are moved and we're seconded. Can I have a show of hands for officers' recommendations for agenda item 7? Okay, that's unanimous. 7 out of 7. I can agree. Agenda item 7 this evening is approved. Thank you very much. Right, that's HS2 done. Ian, you're more than welcome to sit with us for the remainder of the meeting.
I thank you, Chair, but no.
Okay. I think everybody on YouTube got that as well. But we'll just give it a couple of moments to let officers do the musical chairs bit. Okay, right, now we've had HS2, we can now move on to other matters, and we'll go to agenda item 8, Meadow High School in Royal Lane. Are you taking us out on that one?
Yep.
Chris, thank you.
It'll be me. Thank you, Chairman. Item 8 relates to the Meadow High School, which is a special needs school located on the west side of Royal Lane. The site measures approximately 2.1 hectares in area and currently comprises of a cluster of low-rise buildings, hard surface play areas and a sports field. The site is bounded by residential properties to the north, east and south, with properties located on Benson Close, Royal Lane and Clark's Drive. This slide shows the specific red line within which the development would take place or require access. The blue line shows the ownership of the applicant, which in this case is Hillingdon Council. Sorry, that's the existing location plan, apologies. Here is the constraints plan. The school site itself is not subject to any specific constraints. The designated greenbelt land is located to the west of the sports field, and the adjoining roads are subject to a parking management scheme restrictions. This is just a bird's eye view. It should be noted that this does not show the new school development within the centre and the south of the site, including the new 2-storey building with classrooms and sports hall. Here's some photographs. This is the front of the school site from Royal Lane. You've got the inside of the front of the school site. Again, another angle of the front of the school site. An image of the temporary classrooms, temporary classroom 2, just from a different angle. Here's a photo of the access to the site from Benson Close and Peel Way. Again, this is just from further back at a different angle. And this is from Benson Close at Peel Way street scene. Again, from just a bit further back. This is looking in the opposite direction, but from the same road. So, yeah, the application description. The application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a 2-storey academic building, use class F1, demolition of the existing temporary modular structures, and part demolition of an existing main teaching building to facilitate connections to the main school, redevelopment of external hard and soft landscape areas, and associated works. Here is the existing site plan. The the site can be seen as it exists today, including 5 temporary classroom units located on the northwestern corner of the site. Here is a demolition site plan. This is the proposed demolition site plan, which shows that the proposal would remove 5 temporary classroom units and 3 shed buildings. Those are the buildings you can see highlighted in pink. Here's the proposed site plan showing the location of the proposed Part 1, Part 2 story school building. Here's your proposed ground floor plan and proposed first floor plan. This building would facilitate 6 classrooms, a science classroom, food tech room, music room, fitness room, common room, study room, sensory room, therapy room, hygiene room, staff room and offices. Here's the proposed roof plan, which would include a green roof and solar panels. This slide shows the proposed east front elevation at the top and the south elevation at the bottom. This slide shows the proposed west rear elevation at the top and the north elevation facing Benson's Close and Peel Way at the bottom. Okay, so the construction logistics and parking suspension plan. The construction programme is scheduled for approximately 54 weeks, starting in July 2023 and finishing in July 2024. Meadow High School is required to remain fully operational throughout the construction phase. The outlined construction logistics plan submitted confirms that a parking suspension scheme along the eastern side of Peel Way, only one side and not both, will be required during construction to allow the access of construction vehicles to the site. Construction vehicles will need to access the site from Peel Way during term time, as accessing the site from Royal Lane would hinder the operation of the school. Following the submission of an amended outline construction logistics plan, the proposed parking suspension has been amended to a suspension of 17 parking bays during weekdays, Monday to Friday, between the hours of 8 AM and 5 PM. This is an improvement over the hours previously proposed, which were between 8 AM and 6 PM. These hours have been agreed with the applicant following comments from the Highway Authority and would be secured by condition if recommended for approval. Not all parking spaces along Peel Way are proposed to be suspended, and no parking spaces would be suspended during the evening, night or early morning hours. It has also been clarified that there will be no parking suspension during weekdays, public holidays during weekends, public holidays or school holidays, as the site can be accessed via Royal Lane without disrupting the operation of the school. This means that parking suspension would only be required for 195 of the 365 days, equating to 53% of the year. It has also been clarified that larger vehicles and more vehicles will be required towards the start of the construction process, with smaller and fewer construction vehicles required towards the end of the process. Hence, the impact would be limited to the school term time, and by the nature of the construction process itself becoming less intense as the build progresses. It has also been noted that any further reduction in suspension of parking spaces would result in extending the construction time frame, which would result in disruption to local residents for more than 54 weeks currently proposed. Although construction access is proposed to be taken via Peel Way, the applicant has acknowledged the concerns of local residents and responded by reducing the number of hours required for a parking suspension scheme. Subject to a condition which would require the submission of a full and detailed construction management plan and logistics plan, the proposals are considered to be acceptable. In summary, Meadow High School is at capacity with 257 pupils, and there is a need to provide improved and additional school SEND places. Currently, there are only 3 schools in Hillingdon that support children with SEND, and each school is full, with demand increasing. The need is The need is urgent as the pupils are already in primary schools, and this needs to be reflected in an increase in improvement of secondary school provision. In planning policy terms, the proposed development is supported in principle. Following an assessment of the development, the proposal is considered to be sensitive to the character of the street scene and neighbour amenity. The development is also considered to acceptable with regards to its impact on the local highway network and air quality. Planning obligations are proposed to be secured by a Section 106 legal agreement, including a carbon offset contribution, travel plan, Section 278 agreement for the new vehicle crossover and employment strategy within the construction training. The proposal is considered to be acceptable and is recommended for approval, subject to a statement of intent, Section 106 legal agreement and planning conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you very much for taking us through that, Chris. Right, this is the one and only petition item we have for this committee this evening, so we've got to go through a number of speakers. Haven't got anybody here in person, I don't think, from the petitioners, but we do have a written statement on behalf of Peel Way residents, which is Mr. George Houghton, I believe that is right.
Mm-hmm.
So when you're ready, Steve, if you could read out the petition statement. Thank you.
Okay, residents of Peel Way and Benson Close, by and large, are not opposed to the Meadows School scheme itself and are sympathetic to its aims in helping children at the school. There is also some benefit to residents in improving what is currently a very ugly-looking school site at the bottom of Peel Way. The main concern of nearly every resident in the area is the proposal to route large construction vehicles down what is normally a quiet residential cul-de-sac, more used to children on bicycles than large articulated lorries. During the petition stage, all residents that we canvassed were astonished at these proposals and remain so. Residents also doubt the low figures given by the applicant for vehicle movements, average of just 2 per day over the year. The second concern is the loss of parking on Peel Way for large parts of the construction period, a proposal that still looks overly restrictive despite the minor changes in the scheme now proposed. Construction traffic. Recent proposals to the main Royal Lane entrance for construction traffic instead of Peel Way outside of term time are very welcome and will help to provide much needed respite for residents of Peel Way. Hopefully this will not apply during the coming school holidays when most of the demolition and foundation digging is expected. However, residents are still unclear as to why there is a need to use Peel Way for construction traffic at all, given that every other major building scheme at the school in recent years has been able to safely use the main entrance at Royal Lane, with the school remaining open and operational. Residents accept that this will present additional logistic issues for the school and developers in terms of safety, segregation of construction traffic and staff parking. However, these have been overcome in all previous major projects at the school, so why not this time? Residents would like the planning committee to assure itself that the use of Peel Way for construction traffic during term time is absolutely necessary and unavoidable. Parking restrictions. If Peel Way is to be used for construction traffic, then there is a need to look again at restrictions on residents' parking. Proposals to start the parking suspension from 8 a.m, in contrast to the current resident scheme, which begins at 9 a.m, will be confusing and disproportionately inconvenient to residents rushing to get out in the morning to go to work or take children to school at 8:30. It is noted that the Highways Officer's report recommended that the suspension of parking restrictions be limited between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. to bring it in line with the current resident parking scheme in order to minimise movement of vehicles in the area. The committee should note that it is perfectly possible for large delivery vehicles to access Peel Way without parking restrictions. Fire engines, delivery vans and refuse vehicles can currently do so. It is only the largest articulated vehicles that might struggle through the gaps. However, all deliveries to the building site will be scheduled. So why cannot the relatively few larger articulated vehicles that need parking restrictions be scheduled for after 9 a.m? Having parking on both sides of the road helps to restrict speed. There is a fear that having one side of the road completely clear of parking, as proposed, will encourage speeding in general. Why is there a need for a year-long suspension of parking arrangements when there will be a relatively few of the largest articulated lorries that need such restrictions, and most of these vehicles will be needed at the start of the scheme? Is the committee satisfied that all options have been explored here to reduce the restrictions on residents' parking and minimise risks to safety from speeding vehicles? Could the parking restrictions proposals be reviewed regularly, for example, to ensure continued need for parking suspensions throughout the building project? As for road repairs, increasing the volume of HGV traffic on Peel Way will inevitably cause road damage. There must be assurances that the road is repaired following completion of the works. Even if all construction traffic were to be routed via Royal Lane, residents of Peel Way and Benson Close would still have to endure a lot from the noise, dust and disruption from this work over the coming year. All we ask is that this disruption is shared out more evenly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. And Mr. Houghton, if you're watching, just thank you for providing your written statement this evening. Okay, right, we can move on to our next speaker now. I can see we've got a councillor in the room, Councillor Chamdale for Colham and Cowley. I will explain how the traffic light system works. I know, Councillor Chamdale, you know how it works, but anybody watching at home might not. So, Councillor Chamdale has 3 minutes to address the committee this evening. The traffic light system in front of me is red, amber, green. Green will be illuminated for 2 minutes. It will go to amber for the 3rd minute, and then on the stroke of 3 minutes, I will bring Councillor Chamdale to a very polite conclusion. So when you're ready, Councillor, you can press your button and away you go.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Committee and Officers. It's a strange one because we're not objecting to the application, but more the method. Mr. Houghton has put his case very well. What I'm asking from officers is, obviously, we're looking at the DMT6, DMT5, 2, 1, T4 and T7. Depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on, it doesn't apply. I think it doesn't satisfy half of those, especially on DMT6. Also looking at policy DMC1A, right, education for all space, absolutely, we agree with it, and the petitioner also followed that up. Now, in terms of the spaces that we're talking about, now we're talking about losing one side of Peel Way. Then we're looking at half a year, possibly. Then we're looking at our P-tail value. There's a lot of information in the pack that you have which doesn't seem to balance up. On one side we have, you can't use Roy Lane because of the traffic to the school. Then we're saying later on the officer's follow-up report that you can. Now, which one is it? If you can use it, yes. If you can't use it, no. We're looking at losing 17 parking spaces, which is approximately 25 cars. Officers come back and say they're happy that you've got sufficient space around that site, but there's nothing there. There's no meat on the bone in saying, look, these many spaces are going to be lost, and we've got this many here, and we've shown it by what hours of the day. Whenever I go down that road, and I use that road regularly because that's one of my routes where I deliver, it's always full. There's a few spaces available, but not that many. Benson Close. Now, we're talking about Benson Close also getting hits on this. I don't understand why. The gates are in Peel Way. Now, the developers are thinking of opening up further along the way. Now, surely, the lorries are going to have to turn then. We're talking about forward gear, which is great. Peel Way is forward all the way down to Peat Heath. Now, we're talking about going into Benson Close, which is it's a turn, a 90-degree turn. So we need some clarification. I'm seeing the time running out of time. Got to emphasise lorries parking up. Something similar we have with HS2. Will lorries be able to park up in Peel Way, waiting to get in? I'm not sure. I think it's Ian. That wasn't Ian or Andrew. Somebody's mentioned the times. I think you mentioned between 8 and 5. I think the agreement is 9 and 5. Speed was quite right. The key for me is it necessary and unavoidable to use Peel Way?
I'm going to have to bring you to an end there, but I think you probably got your points out. But don't go anywhere yet, because there might be members' opportunity to ask you some questions which might give you an opportunity to get out your last couple of points there. So, Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Councillor Chamdale. You know the road well. What's the provision of off-street parking down there? Do people have driveways, or are they heavily reliant on the road?
We have garages, we have drop-down curbs, but we have a lot of parking spaces because you get a lot of visitors there. And obviously nowadays, modern houses, we don't have one car in the street. Families with 3 kids, or 4 kids like me, you've got 6 cars. But what I'm saying is they are used regularly. Now, you will find a space there when you go down 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You'll find spaces, especially near the front. As soon as you enter Peel Way, those spaces tend not to be used. I think you can park 3 cars there. Then as you drive a bit further down, you go into Norman's Close, you've got parking on the right-hand side on the first house, which we went through the committee when they built new houses. Saxon's obviously closed off, so there's no parking there. And then Benson. Benson is more very much for the residents, 5, 6 houses that we have there. We've got a caravan park there, and you've got 3 or 4 cars. But most of them have drop-down curves.
Okay. Any other questions for Councillor Chamdale? Councillor Gill.
Thank you, Councillor Chamdale, for the insight. Just a quick one about parking usage. Because there's going to be a suspension between the hours of 9 to 5. Currently, how often are they used up from your primary research?
It's not primary research. It's one of my ward areas, and it's a part of my home really, because I'm down there regularly. It's like any other road, especially, and it's in the report. Beg your pardon. It's in the officer's report from the traffic chap, and he says it quite rightly. Between those hours of 9 o'clock and 5 o'clock, what's the terminology used? I've written it down somewhere. He used a very nice phrase, that there'll be people whizzing around looking for spaces. I think Mandeep's figured it out somewhere, isn't it? So I'm sure she can the exact wording for it. But, was it? Oh, I think the police might get involved in there about that. But it is a risk, because with lorries going around, and you've got the family in there, you've got your children in the car, and you're cruising around. And the road, Peel Way is a rather big road. You can park cars either side, and you can take a car through the middle comfortably. Yeah, so you can imagine somebody crossing the road. Yeah. Also, it's about the cyclists, and that's where the I think DMT5 comes in, where there's no cycle provision in the road itself, so you haven't got a cycle lane. So what will people do? Start cycling on the pavement? Because you've got lorries on one side, cars on the other side. That's a concern, because we have a lot of children playing out in the streets there.
Okay. Is that okay, Councillor Gill? Any other questions for Councillor Chamdale? No? Councillor Chamdale, thank you very much for addressing the committee this evening. Go back to your seats. Okay, now we do have the applicant with us this evening. We've got Agent Billy Palmer, and we've got the applicant Tim Martin. Oh, Corey, before we start, you can take a seat there, guys. We've got Councillor Gohill then, so apologies, Councillor Gohill, if you're watching. We do have Councillor Gohill's written statement as well, so we'll go straight to that. Thank you. Okay.
As the local councillor for Colum and Cowley, I absolutely understand the need for the application at Meadow High, and therefore I am not here to object to the application as a whole, as I believe Meadow High is a wonderful asset to our community. However, I would request that members of the committee re-evaluate the need to use Peel Way for construction vehicles. Peel Way is not a main road, but is a rather quiet residential street enjoyed by many families. The use of Peel Way would drastically decrease the quality of life for residents, who would suffer from reduced parking on weekdays, in addition to the ongoing issue of reduced parking on the weekends due to those visiting the Brunel playing fields. Residents on this quiet street would also be unnecessarily burdened with the increased noise pollution and disturbances that come with large vehicles driving down the road. I would request that members of the committee view the fact that there is an alternative option here to use Royal Lane, which is another entrance to the school on a main road. The road is far better suited for those larger vehicles as opposed to a cul-de-sac, and would minimise the impact of residents of Peel Way, and indeed perhaps prohibit traffic build-up on Peel Heath Road also. Thank you to the committee for hearing my representation on behalf of the residents of Peel Way.
Okay, and on behalf of the committee, thank you to Councillor Gohill for submitting her written statement. So we can now come to the agent and applicant's opportunity. Guys, you get 5 minutes through the traffic light system, so 4 minutes on green, 1 minute on amber, and then I'll politely bring you to a close on when we get to red. Just for the purposes of people watching at home, we've got Mr. Billy Palmer, and we've got Mr. Tim Martin, who's Senior Programme Manager for London Borough of Hillingdon, who are here with us this evening. So when you're ready, gentlemen, away you go.
Hi, I'm Billy Palmer, the agent. Thanks for the opportunity to speak tonight. I think the main reason really for us registering to speak is to answer any queries that councillors might have. I think listening to the points of the local ward councillor and of residents as well, we have made some concessions so far as part of the application in terms of the hours of suspension. And I think at this point we would like to put forward a suggestion for perhaps a compromise. I think the hours of 8:30 to 5 would perhaps benefit the residents to an extent. I think a point was already made during this agenda item that that's around the time when people are going to work or doing the school run. And I think that would probably make sense in terms of the hours of usage. An important point is that half an hour pre 9 o'clock is an important delivery time for materials on site. So I think it would be beneficial for the construction project if that half an hour was still in place pre 9 o'clock. But yeah, I think we'd like to put forward that suggestion at this stage. And we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, no, thank you very much for your time. So we've really got an opportunity here, committee members, to ask some questions. There's no time limit on questions and there's no limit on questions. So I can see Councillor Bennett, Councillor Dott and Councillor Ahmed-Wulana and Councillor Davis. I hope I remember that order when we get through to it. So we'll start with Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to grill you with lots of questions. It's one of those tricky applications because I think everybody here is probably in agreement that the school needs to expand. It's the right thing to do. But we've heard quite passionately from the petitioner, from the local councillors, that there's a big impact on residents. When the resident petitioner says every other construction in the past has used Royal Lane, what is so different about this construction that all of a sudden Royal Lane is out of question?
I think there's a couple of points really. One of them is about timing of projects. So the previous projects at Meadow High School the previous project was a DFE funded project. So it's known that these facilities are required, but funding comes at different times and different buildings are funded at different times. I think if you look at the site plan, the location for the new building is right up against Benson Close, and the scheme that has been implemented thus far means that access to that part of the site is blocked off, including the Mugger, including the new sports hall, including the sixth form facility on site. The key point is that the school is required to remain fully operational during the construction phase, which wasn't the case for the previous projects, and that aligns to a scheme at Harefield Academy, which is a satellite site of the school, which was approved by this committee last year. So the two key points off the back of that are that safe and practical access from Royal Lane is not possible, whilst keeping Meadow High School fully operational. It requires access for staff, pupils, visitors throughout the day, and there would be a conflict if there were delivery vehicles and construction vehicles at the same time. And the proposed site is located adjacent to Benson Close. In short, it's just not possible to segregate that construction activity from those necessary teaching and play space points. Just looking at the site plan again, it's the obvious point for access for delivery vehicles and for construction. There isn't really another option on this occasion.
Okay, any follow-up, Councillor?
Yeah, so I guess the geography of where it sits on site is largely irrelevant if at weekends and in the evenings using Royal Lane is fine. Sure. So it really is just what you're saying, it really is keeping the school open during term time, during the weekday, is the problem. Because obviously, from what you say, it is obviously the logical entrance to come in by Peel Way and Benson Close, but if you can come in at other times via Royal Lane, it's just the school activity that is the issue.
It is, and a part of that is about the construction programme overall. the use of Royal Lane on weekends and school holidays means that those larger deliveries and those larger vehicles that need to access the site won't be able to do that in that part of the programme. So it's the reason why programmes are so important for a project like this, and it's also a reason why the outline logistics plan is important, and a detailed one will be secured by condition. And essentially it's the only real way to access that part of the site.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm sure we've got a few more questions to come. I've got Councillor Dotts. Put his hand up next.
Thank you, Chair. As you heard, the parking is a main concern in this application. Field Heathway, Royal Lane, around that area will be highly affected with the disruption, with the major development. Very soon, Hillingdon Hospital is going to be refurbished as well. So, do you have a second gate on the backside from the Benson Close which can be used by parents to pick and drop children, or you only allowed to use parents, just the front?
That's right. So it's partially to do with the secure line of the existing school. SEND schools are sensitive in that sense. It's often, certainly for Meadow, pick up and drop off is often from minibus. And there are students, of course, who are picked up and dropped off by parents as well. But the front of school scheme is a brand new arrangement, parking arrangement, and vehicle pick up and drop off. Impacting that would have a significant impact on the activity of the school. And there is no option for a temporary pick-up drop-off point on Benson Close. That would have increased impact on residents there, given that the construction project is on the boundary. So yeah, I think given the current arrangement, there wouldn't be the opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Okay, any follow-up? No. Okay. Right, Councillor Davis, then Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Thank you. Have you looked at the farmland behind as an access route in? What was the reason we can't use that?
So it's in the outline construction logistics plan as well. Essentially, it's impacting a greenbelt and open land space that can't be taken. It would also have required a reduction in activity of the sports facilities for the school. So PE would have been significantly impacted, for example. That space on the west of the site, within the red line area, is the PE field for school and play. And it was recognised very early on that there would be no opportunity to access third-party land to do that.
So, am I okay to go back? Thank you. So we've already looked at that. The distance, it looks quite a large field to me. Look, I'm thinking if there were 60 children out there in the bottom half, we should surely be able to get access to that building site. That's why I would ask.
No, sure. I think a temporary access in that location has been explored in some detail, and the fact is, in terms of meeting a programme, the programme for Meadow High School also meets the Harefield Academy SEND school programme. Constructing a temporary access all throughout that route would have come at significant cost to the local authority. This is separate from the DFE scheme, of course, and it would have had a significant programme implication as well. So there's a target, there's an aspiration to have the new building in operation for the beginning of the 2024 winter term. Yep. And yeah, going down that route would have significantly put that back in time.
Okay, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ahmed Walana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I'm one of the Colum and Coley ward councillors as well. As we just heard from the petitioner, from the ward councillors, no one is objecting to this school. Everyone is for the school, and it is much needed. There are only 3 in Hillingdon. My question is around alternative access route, which should be Royal Lane instead Peatway. And I'm really not convinced why we cannot explore every option to ensure that this has become necessary and unavoidable.
Yeah, sure.
You can answer that. Yep.
I'd just say, and I'll let Tim make a point as well on that. We extensively explored all of the options in terms of an access point for the construction project. As I was just saying to Councillor Davis then, that kind of third option of going around the back of the field was explored for some time. There are significant cost implications, but actually there's also a third-party land point, and also an issue with the kind of timing of aligning with the Harefield Academy project. But in terms of your question about specifically what's been explored, the key is Royal Lane cannot be the core access point for delivery vehicles for that construction site, simply because the DFE scheme has already been implemented at the front of the site. And it was a point I guess I was trying to make right at the beginning, was that on this occasion there just hasn't quite been that alignment in terms of a DFE scheme and a local authority funded scheme. It just means that a project like this for a classroom at the back of the site has come forward at a later occasion. I think in an ideal world, I think we can all appreciate that you do all of these works in one. It's just unfortunately not the way the system's worked on this occasion. And therefore, the Benson Close Peel Way access is the only real feasible way to get this building built.
Yes, because the MUGA, the multi-use games area, just totally locks off the site. There's for heavy vehicles to come through from Royal Lane, it's just not feasible. Certainly in the holiday time periods, to be smaller deliveries will have to be arranged to come through that area, but for any large vehicle, it has to come down through Peel Way. That's the only logical, safe, practical route. And to deliver this within timescale, we're going to be right tight against time. But unfortunately, where the site is, it just is locked in.
Did you have a follow-up, Councillor?
Thank you, Chairman. You said that you compromised on the timing from 8:30 to 5. Can you just do something even better from 9 to 5, just giving the residents opportunity to organise their day, having more time for on-street parking?
Sure. I'd just make the point that I think the local ward council made a very good point about timings in the morning, and we accept that it's not an ideal scenario to have to suspend parking altogether. It's not unusual for construction projects to require some suspension of parking. I think in this scenario, I'm suggesting, and we're suggesting 8:30 as a start, as a compromise, to essentially prevent the programme from being pushed back any further. The key element from our side is that there is a need to coordinate this project with Harefield Academy, and even just that half an hour in the morning makes a big difference to the deliveries of materials and the larger vehicles that need to access site. Often those deliveries are pre-9 a.m. to allow the full construction work on a day to start at 9 a.m. And I think we're suggesting that 8:30 be a compromise as around the time that people are leaving to drop children to school, leaving to go to work if they're driving to work and they work fairly closely in the area. So I think we would be grateful if we could come to that compromise.
Did you have any follow-ups, Councillor Ahmed-Rulana?
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. If I may, Councillor Bennett, I'll let you come in because there's a couple of questions I want to pick up as well, but I'll let you go first.
Thank you, Chairman, for letting me interrupt you. So my question is just around the time, be it 8, be it 8:30, be it 9. What sort of enforcement do you have at the top of Peel Way to stop a lorry doesn't hit traffic on the way in, it gets quite early? What sort of regulations in place to stop the lorry coming down Peel Way ahead of time, or loitering on Peeled Heath Road waiting for its turn to come in because you think that you know, it's a very, very busy area, particularly in rush hour, particularly with the hospital and the school. It's just, you worry that it's a great concession to start moving the time back, but does it become quite insincere if actually the lorries are just going to turn up at the same time and they're just going to park up and inconvenience other residents?
Yeah. Well, I think, thanks for your question. I think it is an important point, and it's kind of similar on all construction projects, to be honest with you. The key thing is that the contractor has their detailed construction logistics plan. It's very important for them to get that right, and in terms of delivery times being at the suggested and correct times to offload materials, that will be navigated by themselves, and that will be an approved document. And I think it's kind of the same with most applications of this nature, really. The goal is always not to have lingering vehicles, and that's why you have your marshals on site in order to make sure that that doesn't happen. The key thing is that there are very strict delivery times in terms of when vehicles must access the site, because it's such a constrained site and you can only really get one large vehicle on the site at any one time. And I think one of the points that was in the committee report on the agenda item was that we're looking at kind of 2 large vehicles a day in that sense. So in terms of lingering, it's very, very unlikely to ever be a queue of vehicles, if that makes sense, to access the site. It's a limited amount that we'll be able to at one time anyway.
I think what Billy has said about marshals and the plan that the contractor will be providing, we'll be looking for, as council, for a logistics coordinator to be provided to manage what's happening outside the gate. It will be very much a coordinated setup, taking into account all the points raised. So we will see it as a very heavily managed operation.
I'd also just finalise the Highways Authority and Transport have commented and accept that this is going to be the safe passage really onto the site. So yeah, I kind of look to that as well as confirmation that it's an acceptable approach.
Okay. Any follow-up, Councillor?
Yeah, just one, Chairman. So to building on the point around being quite a heavily managed site, we've seen with some other sort of big developments that residents will have a number, a person that they can contact if they've got any concerns on the day. So, you know, I live on Pield Heath Road. I've got a lorry parked outside my house. I can't get off my driveway. Is that applicable in this situation? Is there somewhere that the residents of Peel Way and Benson Close can they call if they've got any concerns?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as with kind of all projects of this nature, there's usually a kind of pre-notification for neighbours. Certainly that there'll be a suspension, because everyone needs to be informed anyway, and obviously the right signage. The school will be managing that process with local neighbours, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, if I may indulge in a couple of questions. And apologies, I hope you don't think we're just labouring the point, but I'm sure you appreciate that we've got to get this right. Everybody around this table, I think, is in favour of the school. We've got to make sure we safeguard the residents of Peel Way, because this is a big scheme for them, and we've got to get it right. So, apologies for labouring the point, but the point I wanted to make was really around your construction timescales. What timescales are you working towards? Because that just gives this committee a little bit of a feel for like how imperative this is. So I just want to try and get a feel for it. When you're looking to get on site, when you're looking to have, children going into school, because we know that there's pressure on special education places, and there'll be a huge demand. As we've already heard, there's a huge demand, and there's only 3 schools that are providing this facility at the moment. So if you could just give the committee a bit of a feel for what timescales you're working at, and whether or not you've got any wriggle room here or not, or we're really tight up against what we need to do. So if you just pick up that point for us.
Thank you for your question. The aspiration as part of the report identified July 2023 as the target start date, which is still the case. We're looking at a 54-week period in that sense to get the core part of the construction project complete, essentially where we're looking at in terms of the suspension of parking bays. From there, after that period, you're looking at internal fit-out, you're looking at the operation of the building being the period after that core construction phase. So essentially, it is, as the report identified, as that 54-week period, and then following that, access is less reliant on Peel Way. It can use Royal Lane for smaller vehicles that are delivering furnishings, for example. So that's the aspiration. You're exactly right in terms of the need for the provision. It aligns quite closely to Harefield. There's a kind of, for lack of a better term, a decanting process for students. So it's really, really important that we stick to that programme and those timescales. Even just a minor differentiation in terms of the suspension period will have some impact. And we're talking about margins here, I appreciate that, but certainly that half an hour before 9 a.m. in the morning will be important.
A couple of follow-ups, if I may. So what I'm hearing there is that if we're looking to be on site in July, then that sort of very handily coincides with the summer half term. So I'm guessing, would you be looking to sort of have access through Royal Lane when the school is closed in the summer holidays? So that we'll be looking then possibly, and I'm thinking for those residents that are watching at home now, we wouldn't need to have parking suspension in place till September.
Yeah, I'll also let Tim speak on this point, but from an enabling works perspective, that's when we're talking about getting on site. And of course the conditions will be clear on when access can be achieved. So there is some security for residents in that sense, and I'm sure they'll be more than willing to report if that's not the case very quickly. So there is some protection in that sense in terms of school holidays.
Yes, during the summer school holidays, there will be enabling works, which involves the demolition, decant and demolition of the temporary buildings that are there, along with redirection of services on the site. A lot of that will be using the access from the front of the school, but we also then have hardcore to bring in for the welfare unit compound area, and also the units themselves, the welfare units, which will be coming down Peel Way, because that's the only way we can get them in. So there will be a need for Peel Way access during the holiday period.
But that not the parking suspension wouldn't be in place at that period. It's not those larger vehicles that require it.
Okay, so I'm just, because one of the conditions proposed is not to use not to use Peel Way in the school holidays. So if we're in sort of like smack bang in July, are we saying then that we would be using Peel Way in the school holidays?
Just to confirm, from the discussions with the contractors, is that Peel Way itself will not be used during the school holidays, and that is still the case. Royal Lane is to be used to bring in those materials at that time, and for the enabling works phase. Okay,
well, no, thank you for confirming that. I think that's really helpful to the committee. Another point I might just follow up on is you said in your piece around, obviously the main works is going to be early on. I think we all understand that. I'm not an engineer or construction engineer, but I think your point, wasn't it? So one of the things I'm keen to sort of understand is how would you continually review the parking suspension? Because there could be an opportunity, 6 months in, that says actually we don't need to use Peel Way anymore, because we can actually get our smaller vehicles in through for furnishings and lights, to quote your expression. So is there would you be reviewing the sort of the travel movements and the construction traffic movements, and then sort of having some kind of mechanism that says actually we can pull back from that now? We can either change the times or completely remove it a bit earlier.
There is a certain amount of security that the contractor would need in terms of a period to enable larger vehicles to access the site. So you're quite right in saying that, as the report indicates, the longer you go on in the project, the less larger vehicles need to access site on a daily basis. The contractor will be reviewing that on a regular basis, but I think that 54 weeks is the period that's been identified as necessary to provide the right level of vehicle access to the site, to enable the construction to kind of appear during that period. I think that gives a little bit of certainty around it as well. That's not an overshot or an undershot. That's been worked through with the contractor. We thought very carefully about how long would be required for the parking suspension, and that's the number we've come to.
If I may, just to follow up on a couple of points, and again, it's labouring this point about why we can't use Royal Lane. And there's an expression you used earlier on, secure line.
Yeah.
Just wonder if you could just talk me through what you meant. And I think I know what it means. It's this for the existing building. I just want to try and understand why that secure line and why access through Royal Lane is so necessary. It's unnecessary and it can't operationally be achieved. But I think committee might just want to hear what that expression actually means and why it's so important as to not being considered as an access point for the construction traffic.
Pick up and drop off is a very important process at Send School. It is at any school, to be honest, but it's particularly important. It's an operation. There's a number of staff who are involved in the process. You essentially are breaking the secure line during those periods where there's pick up and drop off because gates are open, and therefore it's important from a monitoring perspective that all of those areas are identified. And staff are essentially on site and making sure that the process moves smoothly. You've got a lot of vehicle movements at that time, and it's important to allow students to kind of come into the building in swaves rather than all at one time, especially at Send School, when there are wheelchair-assisted students, disability students. So it's important from an access perspective as well. The secure line is implemented by the school. Breaking that secure line on Benson Close would leave two options. For example, the option we were talking about earlier, if there were to be a temporary route elsewhere on site. So it's really important to the operation of the school on a daily basis, and it goes back to my point about the school needing to operate in full during the construction period.
So I think, just paraphrasing what you've told us there, so thank you for sharing that, that was really helpful, is that breaking that secure line would have a fundamental material impact on the access to the school and the day-to-day operation of the school, and there's no other option. I mean, construction traffic, breaking that secure line is something that you've discounted. Okay. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry, me again. You spoke around with the concession from 8 to 8:30, that sort of 8:30 to 9 being, if you like, the golden half hour for deliveries. How does that work towards the end of the day? So the restrictions running up to 5 o'clock, if we're saying that the first half hour is fundamental, does that mean that there's some wiggle room or alleviation later in the day? If there's only 2 vehicles a day that we're planning on going down there, is there any way that the sort of afternoon restriction could be brought forward to finish more with sort of children coming home from school at like 3 o'clock, etc.?
The 2 number is an average figure that we've kind of worked out over the construction period. There will be days where there are a few more vehicles than that, and there will be days when there are less. There might be just the one taking material on or off site. The key point is we have, as part of this application, conceded on an hour at the end of the day that was required by the contractor to have the suspension period. We originally applied for 8 to 6. Reducing that does have a impact on programme to an extent that we're trying to manage as part of this process. I feel that any further reduction late in the afternoon would have a more material impact on the programme, and it would certainly impact the kind of operation date of the building. That's the key point here that we're trying to get to. There's a merge between what's happening on the satellite site and here at Meadow. So I think that extra hour would be beneficial in the afternoon.
It's also the fact that so much congestion out on the roads anyway. So when we have deliveries planned, say the structural steel coming, we'll target for a certain time, but there's no real guarantee that we're going to get it exactly when we want it. So we have to allow also for a bit of movement, bit of float, as they say, for deliveries being later than planned, but still coming within that 5 o'clock deadline for wide loads.
Did you want to follow up on that, Councillor Bennett?
Yeah, if I may. It's slightly different question, but does kind of build on it. And I don't know whether it's a question for you or for officers, but in terms of if this does go ahead, what can you do for the residents of Peel Way? I think I noted in the report that there would be a recommendation that the road may be resurfaced at some point. I think, is there any way that we can kind of cement that? The council's the applicant, the council's responsible for the highway. I worry that would be a bit of an empty promise, and 2 or 3 years down the line, it would go to the highways team and they'd say, actually, even though you've had large lorries trundling up and down for 2 years and a lot of inconvenience, the road doesn't meet the requirements for resurfacing, and it kind of goes on the long-term programme and residents never see the benefit. I just wonder if there's any way that we can firm that up, that if this does go ahead, the road does get resurfaced at the end of it.
I think before let the guys answer that, I think everybody around this table would love to be able to have in written form that there's a guarantee that this road will be resurfaced and all the bells and whistles thrown at it, following the disruption. Fortunately, it's not within the remit of this committee to confirm that, but we can. It's in one of the informatives, informative 6, that any damage would have to be dealt with. So it's a standard informative. Any damages to verges or roads would have to be dealt with. And I'm pretty sure we've got a ward councillors team who would be putting a lot of pressure onto the relevant department at that time. Councillor Jamdale, be putting pressure on the relevant council department at the appropriate time. But there is a process for road resurfacing, and I'm sure we'd love to be able to put Peel Way and the others at the top of the list, but there's a process to follow. But guys, if you want to come back on that,
I think the Chair covered that as best as possible.
Yeah, we will certainly. It's in public domain now. We've noted that point, and it's something we'd all like to do, but there's a process to follow. So, anything else, Councillor Bennett? No, good. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you've asked one of my questions, but I just want to confirm it. The Royal Lane access, I know it sounds like a broken record, but I have to make sure it's right in my head. The Royal Lane access during the 6 weeks holiday, are we saying there's going to be no children at that school during the 6 weeks holiday?
Yeah, essentially, the secure line will be for construction during that period, during the school holidays. That is the plan as part of the contract as well.
So the school is prepared to do no holiday clubs, nothing during them 6 week period?
Yeah, the discussions have been ongoing with the school for quite a while.
Okay. I have a second question, if I may.
Over to you.
Thank you. During that 6 weeks period, are we saying there's also going to be no large vehicles attending that site? So we're using Royal Lane. Peel Way, are the residents still going to have HGVs travelling down there as well? The requirement will be that we do not use Peel Way during the holiday period. There will be kind of medium-sized vehicles that can access Royal Lane because they can navigate it during that period, and that's where the management with the contract is coming into play. They're ensuring that period will be used for other construction activities on site. Okay. And one more, if I may. The marshalling that you mentioned earlier, will that cover the whole of Peel Way?
Sorry, did you say that again?
You mentioned site marshals to cover. Will that cover the whole length of Peel Way? Because I would be concerned of large HGVs parking up at the top.
Yeah, sure.
And I'd want someone to be moving them on.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It kind of mirrors the point that Councillor Bennett made earlier, but just to reiterate, we're not expecting more than one vehicle to be needing to service that site, large HGV vehicle to need to service that site at any one time. and that's just because of the nature of the site itself and its constraint in terms of accessing and coming into the school. In terms of navigating and for a marshal to get a vehicle down the road, if required, the contractor will be issuing a marshal to go out and navigate from the top of the road.
Can I come back?
If you have another question, go for it.
Yeah, so so you're saying 2 vehicles a day attending that site?
That's the average.
Will that be the same during the demolition stage? Because I would worry, look, if you're knocking down 4 buildings, digging up concrete, etc., you're going to have 4 or 5 dump trucks.
Interestingly, site clearance is fairly straightforward. They're temporary buildings that have been in place for 10 to 12 years. They're essentially glorified porter cabins. They're in pretty poor condition.
Yeah.
We know that the temporary permission for those had expired, and some of them have already started being removed. It's not a big demolition process,
right.
and that is essentially to an extent part of enabling work, so they wouldn't require large vehicles in tandem to attend site.
Okay, thank you. No more.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to let you quite sit down yet, so apologies, guys, but it's a point that Councillor Chamdale made earlier on, and it's in relation to turning at the bottom of Peel Way, using Benson Close to get into Peel Way. I take it that will not be a requirement because they will be going straight onto site and then using the space on the site to turn around and come out in forward gear. So I just want some assurance that we won't be using Peel Way and Benson Close as a turning circle.
That is a requirement. It has been assessed by the Transport Team, Highways Authority. They've identified that the tracking that we've given them is acceptable in terms of the measurements and the ability to turn, and therefore there would be no requirement to turn on Benson Close.
Wow, okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Guys, I just really appreciate you giving us very candid answers this evening. If you can turn your microphone off and return to your seats, we'll open the debate now. Okay. So, we spent a lot of time asking some questions here, and there was a lot of information that we all need to take into account. I'm going to summarise it in a second, but I am going to invite Glenn to give us maybe his perspective, in terms of what we can... power's turning off. Just maybe get Glenn, just sort of give us your sort of words of wisdom before we open the debate up to members.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This is an unusual application because everyone that's spoken is strongly in favour of the application. It's mitigating the impact for residents there. And this is a much, much needed facility that's needed soon. And it's important that the action this committee takes tonight doesn't jeopardise the public benefits that will come about from having a school that's operational in September 2024. It's a very, very tight timetable, as has been recognised, and I think members have really, if I may say so, cross-examined officers, and quite rightly so, because when the council is an applicant, there is a perception sometimes from residents that the council has given an easy ride. Well, I think you've actually shown that's not the case tonight. So you've tested out all possible options here. The officers are clear that they need access through Peel Way, and they need the parking suspension in order to do that. So the question then simply is, what is the duration? What hours should the parking suspension be in operation, and for how long? I think so. The issue then is really: is it 8:30 or 9 o'clock? And is it possible, as Councillor Bennett said, maybe to shorten the period at the end of the day? My advice would be here that this committee is not expert in construction logistics. That's part of the construction plan that needs to be, and logistics plan that needs to be submitted to the council for approval. So I think my advice would be there, if you're satisfied with the answers you've been given by officers, 8:30 would seem a reasonable compromise. That does particularly help residents who are taking children to school and starting work. But build in a mechanism for review of those hours of parking suspension. Perhaps say after 3 months might be a time to review that, where the applicant then has to justify why they continue to need the suspension of all parking bays from 8:30 to 5 p.m. And you could consider going earlier than that, but I think that would just produce unnecessary work. It's unlikely that there's going to be significant progress in a construction process within, say, a month. But 3 months would seem a logical time to review that. And then if circumstances are such that actually the progress on site is much better than anticipated, the council could then say, well, we're not going to extend this for 3 months, we'll extend it for 6 weeks, and we'll review it then, say the half term. So I think that's the advice I would give there, Chairman. It would be unfortunate if such an important scheme as this, with real demonstrable benefits for the whole community, and particularly for SEND pupils here, was sort of potentially the timetable was potentially put at risk because of there was no mechanism to review what was actually happening on the ground. So a review, say, at 3 months, and then as regular thereafter as was. And I think finally, Chairman, if there was any additional safeguard that the committee wanted, the logistics plan could be approved by officers in consultation with yourself. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, and wise words. And I think, again, just thank you to members for your questioning of officers this evening. I think it's right that we do that and do it in the right way. But before we open it up for questions, I just want to sort of paraphrase a couple of points. So we've heard that this school is absolutely necessary and vital for special education needs. It provides a fantastic facility and expands our offering for the most vulnerable people in society as well. So that's to be borne in mind. We've seen that it's locked in. We can see, and again, it's for us to judge whether or not we've had sufficient clarity as to sort of the constraints that this site faces. What wasn't really come out of the report, but it's come out of the questioning this evening, is the implication of the merger with the other sites as well. So that needs to be borne in mind. The review mechanism has been talked about extensively, and we need to be thinking about how that looks. And more importantly, we've also heard that there's been a compromise offered in relation to adjusting the times. We've also heard about how important, and I like the expression, Councillor Bennett, the golden half hour between 8:30 and 9. So we've got to take all of those things into account, balance those up in our minds with what we've heard and what we've seen, but then also think about how do we achieve a win-win situation for the school and for the residents of Peel Way, Benson Close. I think it's Bradshaw Way and Norman Close as well, so all in that vicinity. And those are the judgments we've got to make as a committee this evening. So I think I'll pause there and we will open it up for further debate. Councillor Ahmed Malana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After hearing from the petitioner, from the board councillors, and of course there was a great appetite of asking questions from all of us to the officers. In the light of the petition, there were a number of good suggestions offered. I'm still not convinced that we cannot explore further to use Royal Lane. I still think that if we tonight agree to defer for site visit, subject to prevention of any delays, we do not want to lose the whole academic year, I would like to move site visit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would just respond to that, and I think okay, it's moved. We need to have it seconded and then voted on. I think there's two words I'd like committee to have in their thinking when they're chewing this over in their mind, and this is in relation to the access in Peel Way, and the two words is necessary and unavoidable. We've heard particularly, and that's why I asked the question about the secure line, and that's what I'd like to have members think about. Also, I would just maybe ask members to think about, we'll move for a site visit. Will a site visit give you anything in addition to what you've seen today? So we'll pause it there. That's just my thoughts as the chair of this committee. But thank you for raising it. And yep, it's probably something that other members might have a view on. So I'll pause for a second there and see if anybody's got any other views on what we've just been talked about. So any other members want to contribute? Councillor Davis.
At this time, I've got a few questions I need to ask before I talk on the site visit. Are we able to add some conditions in that I think would definitely protect the residents? The first one would be, I'm looking under the site management plan. That doesn't say to have a site contact. Oh, I take that back. I might have missed that. Okay, I'll take that back. The second one, can we condition that that Peel Way is not used during the 6 week when the school is closed? I might have missed it. I am very sleep deprived.
I think it's condition 5, Councillor Davis.
Yeah. The third one is we've got wheel washing. It is there, but can we condition all 4 roads that are affected with that? So at the moment it says it will clear the area, but so can we have the roads named? And if I may, I have one more, if that's all right. It might be towards Alan. Can we restrict HGVs from going down Benson Way? Because my concern would be that residents down Benson Way are going to be hindered if a HGV makes a wrong turn. Can we have signage, temporary signage, something like that? I don't know if we have that in our powers.
Did you want to pick that one up, Alan?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As you will have heard from the applicant, vehicles will be able to turn on site, so there would be no need for them to go along Benson Way. And in the construction logistics plan that we will require the applicant to submit, there would be a routing diagram for vehicles, and I would not expect that routing diagram to include Benson Way at all.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.
You can come in, Amanda.
I'm happy to add to condition 8 that the routing plan should specifically exclude Benson Close, which might be more. It will remind the officers when we're looking at the detailed construction plan. And yes, we can add wheel washing to condition 8 as well. It'd be helpful.
Yep, come back, Councillor.
The reason for this is I want to say, at the moment we're relying on humans not to be humans and make errors. And if there was a human error of a vehicle going down Benson Way, we know the width of that road. If we were to have a heavy good non-rigid vehicle down there, it could really cause the residents some problem. That's why if we can condition just temporary signage, it would jog the driver's minds not to go down there. Thank you.
I think we're going to get something added into that. So, Councillor Davis, did you have anything else to add on that?
Not at the moment, Chairman. Thank you.
Oh, you're going to hold something back for the end. Okay. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. My question's just around the parking management scheme. So if you're a resident of Peel Way and you have a permit to park on Peel Way, does that also allow you to park on neighbouring roads? And if so, what is the edge of that boundary? So how far are people going to have to go and park their car instead of Peel Way?
Yeah, Alan's going to jump straight in here, I think. Or have you got something?
I was going to say, if you look at, we don't have a plan that's big enough, but I could show you the parking management zone is all of the roads around the hospital. So at the moment you can see highlighted in yellow, and this is the beginning of the hospital, but imagine that yellow stretched all the way around the entirety of the hospital. It literally encases it. The Hillingdon, the what's called HH parking zone encases the hospital, and a resident at Peel Way is entitled to park anywhere within any of those roads which wrap the hospital site. So it's quite a big area. I know that Alan has the numbers.
Do you want to come in there, Alan?
Thank you, Chairman. Parking management
Thank you. And before Councillor Bennett comes in the report it talks about surplus, not surplus, but it says that there are an excess of parking spaces from following an assessment. Can you just give the committee a feel for how many parking spaces are likely to be available once the suspensions are in place?
Thank you, Chairman. I have asked the question of colleagues, how many cars can parking zone HH accommodate? And the answer given was, well, we do know there are over 1,000 households and over 700 permits issued. The proposal to suspend 17 car parking bays, would lead to a reduction of 25 car parking spaces. That's because a parking bay might be 8 metres long, which is able to accommodate 1.5 cars rather than 2. So we know that there are I know the exact number, 737 permit holders, and those 737 permit holders will lose the opportunity to park in 25 spaces that they previously enjoyed. And that is not a great number, but that includes parking spaces that are some distance away from where they might live.
But I think what committee got to bear in mind with that, just heard that, is that that's 25 out of 737 for a temporary period. So just have to bear that in mind. Councillor Bennett, then Councillor Davis is coming back.
Thank you for that. So just to build on that question, is there any sort of provision to increase the number of spaces in HH? Are there any areas of highway where actually a space could be made but hasn't been to date for X, Y and Z reason? I'm guessing not, but I wanted to ask.
I think that's a valid question. However, creation of parking management schemes are resident-led. So at the moment there is no proposal from residents to expand the parking management scheme, and no. So at this point in time it would be suspension of those 25 spaces with no replacement. But I think it's a really valid question that the parking management scheme area, HH, is quite vast, and it's not ideal to have to walk maybe a greater distance to your car parking space. However, there would be opportunity for permit holders to park.
Okay, and I think, again, I'll come in there just in between questions, is that, again, committee members have got to satisfy themselves, but a request was made by the petitioner, Mr Houghton, that this committee satisfies itself that there are no other options, and that's a question that you need to ponder about as the debate progresses. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. Can we also, do the officers feel it's worth adding a review of the parking management scheme, like Glenn and the applicants? Do we think it's worth adding in?
I definitely think it is worth adding in, primarily because construction may be quicker, may be slower, and at the moment we've been told that by virtue of changing that half an hour in the morning, which has been offered by the applicants, which I'm greatly supportive of, it may well change the duration of the suspension period. So we may be moving from 54 weeks to, let's say, 60 weeks. So reviewing it periodically would be beneficial, primarily because the period is going to get longer anyway.
So would a 3-month review be something we could condition?
I think perhaps the 6-week time frame of every half term might be useful, because that would be a point at which the traffic would then move into Royal Lane, and then that might be an opportunity for Hillingdon Council to assess whether they still need all of the bays.
Yeah, I think that'd be good. Whatever's best for the residents, really, in this situation. So yeah.
You can.
Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, if I may indulge with a question, I think it's going to come Alan's way. But in terms of, if this was to go ahead, would we be looking to sort of make sure we got the most carbon-friendly vehicles, like Euro 6 classified vehicles, to serve the construction site?
Chairman, if committee so wished, that is something that could be put in the construction logistics plan. We could require the applicant to put that in the construction logistics plan. something related to that which I will mention is there will be a requirement for the vehicles to have the direct vision standard, meaning they can see pedestrians and cyclists fitted with the correct type of mirrors, except for example.
I think most construction vehicles are Euro 6 compliant nowadays anyway, but it shouldn't be two owners. But it would be another safeguard for residents. Okay, Councillor Davis, you wanted to come back?
Sorry guys, I've really woken up now. I'm only joking. Alan, I'm not sure if it's in the report, but it does it mention about no idling? Have we got a no idling clause? I've read so much of it, I can't see if it's in this one or not. If not, can we condition that we have no vehicles idling on the construction site and entering the site? Because I'd be very concerned that we've got vulnerable children and residents in this area all at once, and the last thing I'd want is idling.
I have to be honest, I can't see it either, although condition 8 is really long, so I will add it if it's missing, but no idling within the site and then on the roads approaching the site.
Okay, right, just to remind, because this is turning into a very, very healthy debate, but I'm just a reminder to members that we are moved for a site visit. Do I have a seconder? No. Okay, so that hasn't gone forward for a site visit. Any other councillors want to take me forward on this? Councillor Gill.
I had one question about the capacity of the school. Sorry, microphone.
Just a question about the capacity of the school. I understand and there is a big need for SEND places in Hillingdon, but there's no mention of how much the capacity is going to increase by. It just kind of says 257, unless I've missed it.
It is in there somewhere.
I'm on Councillor Davis as though they're sleep deprived completely.
Sorry, it is a nominal increase. It's not a significant increase. There was an approval last year to have no more than 280 students on site, so this will maintain that cap, and so that's conditioned as well.
Thank you.
I'm going to beat you to it, Councillor. Condition 12, landscaping scheme. It might be in there, but could we maximise any trees to be the species that are maximised carbon absorbing? Was that your question? Sorry about that. We'll be able to do that?
Yes, we can.
We can. Okay. I'd also draw members' attention to the addendum as well. So there's two new conditions which aren't in your committee report, but they are on the addendum. So the standard one there, which is the auto lighting. And there's also a further condition which, once the construction is completed, prohibits the Peel Way Benson Close entrance from being used as a main entrance for the school. Emergency access, yes, of course, but not as a main entrance for staff and pupils and the like. Okay, Councillor Davis.
Sorry, Chairman, I have another question for Alan. As we know, Fieldheath Road is highly congested during these times. What do we believe the traffic impact will be in the area, or especially on that main route in, past the hospital, etc.?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. As you will have heard from the applicant and contained in the report, the construction of the new school extension would generate 2 extra vehicles per day, and because the uplift in the school roll, which I can remember is 8 pupils, we don't anticipate the school would generate any further traffic, so the situation would be as it is at the moment. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, do you want to come in that, Mandip?
So you may see that there's no sort of delivery and servicing plan, and that's purely because an uplift of 8 doesn't justify us having a new delivery that was secured under the main permission that the DFE did. So they will adhere to those arrangements, which were all via Royal Lane and not via Benson Close and Peel Way.
If I may, Chairman, my question behind that is that yes, we may only have 2 extra delivery vehicles, but we're obviously going to have 50, 60 staff working on that site, builders, contractors, etc. Do we expect to see an increase in cars or traffic through that?
Alan, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. That's a very good question, and it needs to be clarified. The people working at the site would not be able to park along Peel Way during the daytime. Between 9 and 5, they would not be able to park on any of those car parking spaces. And then we do know that there, as I've mentioned earlier, parking management scheme HH is very extensive, so there would not be opportunities for people working at the site to park on the majority of the roads surrounding Meadow School either. So we would expect the applicant to make provision for workers to park within the construction site. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah. Is that something we can condition, or as an informative?
So at the moment, Condition 8, Part 2, asks the construction management plan details to be submitted to request that the measures for traffic management and encouragement of sustainable modes of transport for workers, including prohibition of construction vehicles parking on the local highway. So there are measures that we are trying to employ through the construction logistics plan to make sure that there is a sustainable flow of employees coming to the site. It's not the most sustainable site, but if we can encourage car sharing at the bare bones, and then encourage people onto trains and tubes, it would be beneficial. So that is secured through Condition 8. Thank you.
Good question. Thank you. Did you ever come back? We've got Councillor Bennett.
No, I'm happy to move with officer's recommendation, if that's okay, providing the conditions are met.
Okay, we will summarise this pages and pages of amendments in a second or two. But Councillor Bennett.
Councillor Davis beat me to it, so I am happy to second, but I think it would be beneficial that probably our proposal and second is based on all of the conditions and everything we've added on. I think we've chewed this over now for well over an hour. I think we really have explored every avenue. There's a really good concession from the agent. I think that will really help the residents in terms of that extra half an hour in the morning.
Thank you. And again, I will attempt with some help from the people next to me here to try to wrap up where we are. So we are proposed and seconded. So here we go. Right, Condition 8 we are going to amend to make particular reference to Benson Close and no access for construction traffic. Condition 8 we think is sufficient enough to protect the residents from workers' traffic, so we think that's sufficient. We are also got the addendum items here that we needed to as well. What we haven't debated, again I'll throw it open, I know we are moved and seconded, is the change in suspension times. So our members minded, I'm sort of picking up body language here, that the 8:30 till 9, that wouldn't go down very well, would it? 8:30 till 5 is something what we want to put into the initial condition, but ensuring that there is a review mechanism in place, and that the wording of that review mechanism, and because I'm going to say that the construction logistics plan, I'd like that to come to me for sign off. Yeah. So that won't be delegated to officers. That will come to us. Yeah, but we've had the debate, councillor. So we're just debating that. Unless any members have materially opposed to that. So we heard the debate around the difference between the 8:30 to the 9 as well. So again, that's what I wanted to make sure that members were clarified as to what that was. And the review mechanism, what are we saying on that? 6 weekly?
6 weeks.
6 weekly. Again, the chair to oversee the construction and logistics plan. We're going to add Euro 6 engines to be into the construction logistics plan, and no idling element to be included in there. And we were going to sort of expand Condition 12 to include tree absorbing species, if I remember rightly. Is that correct?
Yes, and the last thing was wheel washing.
And the wheel washing to name the specific roads
In Condition 8.
in Condition 8 as well. Yeah. So, have I forgotten anything there? So I think the point for debate then is our members happy with the compromise that was offered by the applicant, an agent, for an 8:30 till 5, but making sure that review mechanism kicks in 6 weekly. So that could change 6 weekly. Okay, so we are moved and seconded with all of those amendments in place that we've just heard. So can I take a show of hands for this application? All those in favour of officer's recommendation? That's unanimous. Unanimous. Okay. So agenda item 8 this evening is approved. Now, just want to sort of thank members and thank the participants in the conversation as well for your time and for the quality of questioning as well. So thank you very much for that. Okay, agenda item 9. Guess what? Meadow High School. So this is a sort of sister application, but completely different. There's no petition on this. This is purely and simply for the erection of the temporary buildings to support the application that we've just approved. Chris, over to you.
Item 9 also relates to Meadow High School, but is limited to the front of the site adjoining Royal Lane. Here you have the constraints plan. The site is subject to the same constraints as previously mentioned. Here you have a bird's eye view again. And I'll just quickly run through some photos of the site. So here's the school site. This is the car park which fronts Royal Lane. You've got the school play space. It's just a wider angle view, so you've got the view of it, all of the play space there. In terms of the application description, the application seeks permission for the temporary redevelopment of the site, including the removal of the external spaces to provide a temporary 2-storey academic building, which is for use class F1. Here you have the existing site plan and the land which is subject to redevelopment or to this application is highlighted in red here. Here is the proposed site, sorry, that's the existing site plan again, just a bit closer. Here you have the proposed site plan showing that the proposed temporary 2-storey academic building would be located in between the main reception building and sports hall on an area of existing play space. We have the proposed ground floor plan showing the provision of the 3 classroom units. The first floor plan showing the provision of a further 3 classroom units, which creates a total of 6 classrooms. Here you have the proposed roof plan. This shows the proposed elevations with the front and east elevation shown at the top and the south elevation at the bottom. In terms of a construction logistics plan, the proposed development would only require access from the site via Royal Lane, not Benson Close or Peel Way to the north. The construction logistics plan submitted to support the application has been reviewed and is considered acceptable, subject to a condition which requires a final and detailed construction logistics plan. So effectively what has been submitted with this application is an outline construction logistics plan. In summary, this application seeks temporary permission for a period of 2 years for the construction of a 2-storey academic building, use class F1, in order to facilitate the development of a new school building under application reference 3348 APP 2023-138. The proposal is considered to be acceptable in principle and with regard to its impact on neighbour amenity, the character and appearance of the local area, local highway network, flooding, trees, landscaping and access. On the basis that the temporary permission is granted and subject to conditions, this application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
No, thank you for that, Chris. Okay, there's no petition with this item, so there's no speaking rights. We can go straight to the debate. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the fact that there's no petition, the fact that the ward councillors and residents have said they're happy with the school expansion is all good. My only question was just, In terms of the dismantling of this temporary building when that comes, is that going to be a further impact on Peel Way, or will the traffic for that be managed by Royal Lane?
Over to you, Mandy.
So all traffic for this proposal is taken via Royal Lane. It wouldn't be via Peel Way. And then condition 1 requires restoration of the space as well, back to a play area.
Okay, does that answer your question, yeah? Okay. Councillor Gill.
Second time around. Yeah, just looking at the agenda there is quite straightforward, I think. I think there's no petition. The residents are happy with this side of it. They were just had objections with the previous agenda, so I'm happy to propose the motion.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Any other contributors? Councillor Dotts.
Just a question, Chairman. Thank you. The construction logistic access via Royal Lane for this one, and the previous one, which we already discussed, is from Benson Close. What's the time limit? Like, are they both construction plan going to start at the same time, or different timings?
Okay, so it's a question of timescales.
I have to be honest, I don't know exactly, but this unit is required for the start of the new term in September. And because it would come in via Royal Lane when they will be using that access from the school, I don't think it would have any impact. I believe it's also delivered ready-made to the site and is just placed. It's not something they have to build per se. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does that answer your question? Question I was going to have is, does it need a secure by design condition? Or is it temporary in nature? And
I think it would be closed off by the main gates.
Okay.
At the entrance and the exit. Probably not.
That'd be covered off. Okay, lovely. Councillor Davis.
Can I have some clarity on what secure by design means? I've never heard that term.
Well, it's in most of your planning papers, but it's where the Metropolitan Police give an accreditation of the layouts and anything like that. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Davis again, back to you.
Thank you. I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Right, we're moved and seconded for agenda item 9 this evening. Can I have a show of hands, please, for that? So that's unanimous. Agenda item 9 this evening is fully approved. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to ask committee if there's any appetite for a quick recess to sort of refill water bottles, given that we've been here for 2 hours. I think just 5 minutes. Would that be okay, Steve? We could do that. So we just have a 5-minute recess, let people just stretch their legs, because we've still got another 3 applications to go. So 4 applications to go. I was hoping. Sure we wouldn't miss one. But it's okay. So we're just going to break for 5 minutes now. If we could just come back, it's whatever. 8 minutes past 9. That'd be great.